Byrd Fellowship program was initiated with the first Byrd Fellow in 1987. I believe Byrd Polar changed its name from Institute of Polar Studies to the Byrd Polar Research Center in 1986. The Byrd Fellowship was initiated with funds that are generated by an endowment, and the name, it's a named endowment for Admiral Richard E. Byrd and his wife Marie, but we simply call it the Byrd Post-doctoral Fellowship. We have a competition for this. It is announced, the opening for applications is announced on our website. It's announced in professional venues such as with AGU's EOS. We have a selection committee that reviews the applications and the letters of support from ideally the candidates' prior faculty advisors. So we've been very fortunate to have just an outstanding set of Byrd Fellows since 1987.
Still a structural geologist. I'm interested in mountain building processes and rock deformation. About 4 years ago, published a book, Reading the Rocks, the Autobiography of the Earth, which has seen some modest success in science writing.
I'm working on several things, but primarily I'm working on black carbon, so little nanoparticles of soot trapped in snow and ice, and its distribution in the Earth's atmosphere and its history, and how it relates to the history of fire and climate.
My specialty has always been to look at organic matter in marine sediments as tracers for past events and past organisms like ocean productivity or vegetation on land. And so
at the moment, I'm working on sending out invitations for a NATO advanced research workshop on environmental security in the Arctic Ocean that I'm convening with a co-director from the Russian Academy of Sciences. This is the first formal dialogue between NATO and Russia regarding security in the Arctic Ocean.
I'm working on instrumentation to deploy through the ice sheet to the base of the ice sheet, to subglacial hydrological instrumentation, deep ocean instrumentation. One of these nice toys is a remote operated underwater vehicle which folds and unfolds that we can deploy it through a narrow ice borehole into the water-filled sub-ice shelf cavity.
I still work on the ice core record in China.
I also have a new project that I'm going to Antarctica for just in a few weeks here, where we'll be flying unmanned aerial vehicles, robotic planes, to make some measurements.
The projects that I'm working on currently, well, the main one really is establishing a lake-based paleoclimate research program in Asia, specifically on the Tibetan Plateau and in the Himalaya.
Well, my research work, which is just part of my job, involves getting lake sediment cores out of the tropical Andean lakes. I'm also doing some local work here in upstate New York on glacial geology and lake sediment records of environmental change and pollution records and so forth.
I'm looking at how organic carbon is cycled through polar environments.
And it's using fossil tundra, some fossil tundra that actually I discovered while I was getting my Ph.D. To use as a paleoclimate indicator.
I continue to work on problems in plate tectonics in general.
So right now I'm very much involved in the planning process and logistics of participating in a large expedition.
I could actually start with our first one in 1987 and tell you a success story for every one of them. But it would be interesting to have a map and put on the map, you know, where all of our Byrd Fellows are currently located. And what we would see is that they're literally around the globe.
I did a field season down in Antarctica, which was fantastic.
With the fellowship, I got the chance to go to Antarctica. And for me, that was one of the main unique and characteristic aspects of the Byrd Fellowship. Not many fellowships provide the opportunity to work in Antarctica. And by working there, after that experience, I felt, boy, if I can do research in Antarctica, I can do research anywhere else. And so I eventually ended up working in Southern Africa. I worked in South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Mozambique. And then about 4 years ago, I did 2 field seasons in Madagascar, entirely different experience. And now I'm working in China.
And so that was the most recent field experience as well. We were just down in Guinea for 2 months collecting ice cores from the Puncak Jaya region, or basically the area around Puncak Jaya, which is the highest peak in Indonesia.
I'm preparing to go to Greenland for 2.5 months.
And I continue to work in the high latitude regions of the Arctic, Arctic Norway and Canada.
The tropical Andean lakes, the high elevation lakes in Peru and Bolivia and Ecuador.
My work is in the polar regions, and I do work both in the Arctic and the Antarctic.
I haven't been out in the field yet. I've been mostly a lab rat.
One of the things that we do now is we ask our Byrd Fellow applicants to identify 1 or 2 people, ideally like group leaders here in the Byrd Center, get in contact with them and make sure that you are going to have someone who's going to be committed to working with you as a mentor.
When I was a Byrd Fellow, my mentor was Dave Bromwich, and I worked in the polar meteorology group that he heads at the Byrd Polar Research Center. The work that I did while I was with Dave was primarily focused on atmospheric modeling in the polar regions, and working with Dave, we developed a model called the Polar MM5, which was widely used in the U.S. from the late 90s until about 2005 or so.
Ian Willens, who of course was a glaciologist, was a wonderful mentor to me because he studied glacial flow and ice deformation in the solid state, and many of the approaches that he used to understand the ice streams in Antarctica could be translated to understanding rock deformation. So Ian really acted as my primary advisor. But I should also mention Terry Wilson, who's a structural geologist, and David Elliott, who was the director of the center at that time. All of these people were really important mentors to me when I came.
My mentor was Steve Foreman, who was there in the 90s for probably at least 10 years, I think.
I followed the Professor Lonnie Thompson and do the ice core record here, and studies ice cores from the Tibet Plateau, and we construct about the 500 years climate change over there.
I worked with Kees and Beer. Kees was my official mentor, and I mainly worked with Kees and Beer on energy balance modeling of Greenland, of Jakobshafen Glacier, was involved in some ice sheet bed topography from the radar flights, which I think Ian Willens did. And I also worked with Bea and Kees on the ISAT and airborne laser altimetry data investigating surface elevation changes caused by subglacial hydrology in West Antarctica. I think also Ian Willens had started some of that work.
Well, I was mentored by Dr. Barry Lyons, and he was involved with the LTER, which is the long-term ecological research program. Barry is a world-renowned scientist and a polar researcher, so to be able to learn from him is just invaluable.
And Lonnie is obviously very famous in the paleoclimate community, so just having his name on proposals and the recognition that comes with that has been tremendously helpful, particularly in New Guinea. I mean, that project in particular would not have been possible for the ice cores without somebody in that kind of time in his career where they can do those types of projects. So I guess the mentorship is really, we as postdocs are supposed to have our own ideas and our own direction, and then they can help to facilitate where you want to go. And so I think it's been really helpful so far.
Primarily my mentor was Alan Mosley Thompson, but it was also Lonnie Thompson and the whole paleo group actually, including Jahong Koldai, who was there at the time. I'd also include Mary Davis in that list. And at the time we were working on some Greenland ice cores as part of the Parker project, and also Kilimanjaro ice core that Lonnie had drilled at the time. The part of the mentorship program there, I became exposed to the how competitive research grants work in the US, and so basically the success of my career really spawned out of my time at Byrd.
Now, one of the limitations on the Byrd Fellowship is that these people have to be within 5 years of receiving their Ph.D. Generally, our postdoctoral fellows are within 1 year. So they're very newly minted Ph.D.s. Our expectations for the Byrd Fellows is that they will come here, they will interact with our other research scientists, faculty, and students. And one of their primary goals is to publish, to get papers submitted from their dissertation research. In general, our Byrd Fellows do not come here to Byrd Polar with the idea that this is going to be their permanent home. They actually come here viewing this as a position that will allow them to jumpstart their professional careers.
My time at Byrd was really a pivotal point in my life, I think. Many of the ideas that I'm working on now were really seeded at my time in Byrd. Byrd was really I would say my indoctrination into the full-fledged research.
I think the Byrd Fellowship really opened up doors and opened up my eyes to what was possible in terms of doing international research in geology.
What I was working on was just some more traditional glacial geology, but then Byrd was where I shifted away from that PhD work and started this new work. It was just the tip of the iceberg, though, so now it's greatly expanded.
So one of the aspects of the teaching course at Ohio State was the outcome was the Antarctic Treaty Searchable Database, and that emerged into new types of projects. We have a project with the Marine Mammal Commission involving several hundred different types of treaties and conventions that have been adopted by the United States. Another outcome of the course was a book on science and policy, global lessons from Antarctica, that was published by Academic Press in 2002.
It's very, very important for me because about the 1.5 years experience gave me the better position in China.
So Dr. Wong came as a Byrd Fellow. He spent 18 months with us. While he was here, he published a number of papers, a very excellent paper. He published as the first author in Geophysical Research Letters. And he is now back in China, and he is back in Lanzhou, and he is now the director of the Division of Cryosphere and Global Change at what was then called the LIGG, but now is called the Cold and Arid Regions Environmental and Engineering Research Institute, which is one of the institutes and centers that sits under the Chinese Academy of Sciences. So he came as a young postdoc, had his experiences here, made connections very broadly, not just here at Ohio State, but with colleagues of ours, meaning Byrd Polar colleagues around the world, and now he is back in Lanzhou as a center director.
Well, it definitely expanded my research consciousness, I think, in the sciences. I think for everybody, going to graduate school is a rather narrowing experience where you're asked to delve very deeply into a very narrowly defined question. And when I came to the Byrd Center, I was surrounded by glaciologists and climatologists and people who were working on many different aspects of the Earth system. My office was right next to Lonnie Thompson's, and so I was always overhearing conversations about ice cores. So for me, it was the beginning of a much greater awareness of fields outside my own and real interest in larger questions about geology and the climate system. And that's certainly been something that's been important to me, especially teaching at a liberal arts college where we have fairly small departments, and I've been very much involved with the environmental studies program here. I've had to be able to speak comfortably with people across many disciplines.